When my wife, Abigail, went hiking with some online friend and vanished, I was out of town on business, completely frantic. That same night, I called the police, alerted search and rescue teams, and even put out a public missing person notice. 2 days later, when the rescuers finally brought her home safely, the first thing out of her mouth was a complaint. She accused me of overreacting and wasting public resources. I laughed, calm and collected, pulled out the divorce papers I'd already prepared, and told her to sign and get out. The moment I had posted the missing person notice online, speculation began running wild. Sitting alone in my hotel room, watching the home surveillance footage, a deep chill crept over me. Abigail and I had been married for 2 years, a rushed wedding due to an unexpected pregnancy. Tragically, half a month after our wedding, she fell down the stairs and lost the baby. Holding her in my arms as we both sobbed uncontrollably, I comforted her, telling her we were still young and would have plenty of opportunities to have children. Claiming she needed time to recover, Abigail quit her job and soon immersed herself in online friendships. I initially believed it was just her way of coping with the grief, but it wasn't long before I realized she'd started an online romance. For the sake of her so-called true love, Abigail began rejecting any intimacy with me. Even when we occasionally shared a bed, it was cold, distant, mere obligation. My breaking point came when I discovered she'd secretly bought lingerie, camping gear, and even booked hotel rooms. At first, foolishly, I thought she was planning a surprise for me. Then reality slapped me hard. She was plotting an exciting getaway with her soulmate. That's when I knew I couldn't stay married to a woman like her. Not long after, the rescue team contacted me. "Mr. Edwards, we're near your wife's campsite. Do you know what she was wearing when she left?" I paused, staring at the footage from the security camera, my voice low and tight. "Black windbreaker. Black yoga pants. Please, just find her. Whatever's happened, I can handle it." There was a silence on the other end. Then the man said quietly, "We'll do our best. You'll be the first to know if we find anything." As soon as the call ended, I posted a missing person alert across every social media platform I could think of. I needed as many eyes as possible looking for her. I even shared it to my private feed, something I almost never did. It was already past 11 p.m., but messages started pouring in almost instantly. "Edward, are you okay? I saw your post. Who was Abigail with when she left? Edward, don't worry about the company, I'll take care of everything. Just go find her. Edward, what the hell is going on?" I didn't respond to any of them. Not until my mother-in-law called. "Edward," she snapped, "did you really post that missing person alert? You need to take it down. Now." My voice cracked with urgency. "Did you hear from her? Has she called you? Please, just tell Abigail to call me." She hesitated. "No, I don't know where she is. I just think you're blowing it out of proportion. Maybe she just needs to clear her head." "I've already brought in a rescue team," I said, my chest tightening. "I'm really scared something's wrong. Look, I can't waste more time. I'm flying back tonight." I hung up before she could argue, grabbed my bag, and booked the next flight out. Deep down, I knew my mother-in-law had known all along. She just didn't tell me. After I found out Abigail was seeing another man, I had surveillance cameras installed all around the house. Her mother tried to talk some sense into her, told her to think about the marriage, to make it work, but none of it mattered. Abigail had already made up her mind. Now she's panicking, but not because she's worried about me. She's afraid the truth might come out. What she doesn't realize is, I planned this. When I saw her leave with that man, I felt nothing. No panic, no pain. Just cold clarity. I didn't rush to the campsite like some desperate husband. Instead, I checked into a nearby hotel, calm as ever. I set up my equipment, making sure the camera had a clear view of the only trail leading out of the campsite. There's just one exit. If they come out, I'll catch every frame. Abigail, I know you're watching now. When you finally show up, the world will see you for what you are. You and your little affair, caught in broad daylight. You betrayed our marriage, and betrayal comes with consequences. From the hotel window, I could see the flashing lights of police cruisers and rescue vehicles gathered outside the woods. My live stream had already gone live. Within minutes, thousands of viewers flooded in. I don't get it. That campsite's part of a developed resort area. The weather's fine, no storms, no wild animals. How does someone just vanish? Feels like a publicity stunt if you ask me. Still, what if she passed out somewhere in the woods? Better safe than sorry. Weren't there two people out there? Honestly, I think the guy who reported her missing is up to something. What if they're not even missing? Maybe they're holed up in a hotel nearby, if you know what I mean. The commenters were sharp, too sharp. They were already starting to put the pieces together. I posted another update across social media. Abigail, please come back. I'm really worried about you. I shared it everywhere, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. The search was trending now, and I could only imagine how panicked she must be feeling. 2 hours into the live broadcast, something happened. Rescue teams and local police found Abigail in the hotel. My phone rang almost immediately. "Mr. Edwards," said the rescue team leader. "We've located your wife." "Really? Is she okay? Can I speak to her?" There was a brief pause on the line, then he agreed. As soon as the call was connected, the camera captured the perfect shot. Abigail walked out under police escort. Her face was as gloomy as a dark cloud. The man who had left with her was 2 steps behind her. She took the phone, her voice sharp and bristling. "Edward, what the hell are you doing?" "Abigail. Thank God. I've been so worried, I couldn't reach you, and I didn't know what else to do." She clenched her teeth. "Do you have any idea how much public time and resources you just wasted? My phone died, that's all." "I know. But I was terrified, Abigail. I need you to come home." I ended the call before she could say anything else, my expression stone cold as I looked out the window. I couldn't hear what the rescue team said to them, but their expression spoke volumes: tight jaws, narrowed eyes. They weren't thrilled. The police didn't look pleased either. Still, they gathered Abigail and her companion and led them away. Back on the live stream, the chat exploded. "They found her? That fast? Wait a minute, look at their shoes. Not a speck of mud. Did they even go hiking?" The comments rolled in, fast and furious. And just like that, the internet had turned. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe, but the feeling passed quickly. I ended the live stream, packed up my gear, and made my way home. By the time Abigail walked through the door, I was already there, waiting. While I had the house to myself, I'd had the lawyer draft the paperwork. The second she saw me, her temper flared. "Edward, are you out of your mind? What gave you the right to call the cops? You ruined my whole day. What the hell are you trying to pull?" I looked up and handed her a glass of water. "Take a breath. Sit down. Here, drink something." I motioned toward the couch. She shot me a glare but didn't say no. Still fuming, she slammed the glass down on the table, crossed her arms, and flopped onto the sofa. Then she kicked at me with the side of her foot, like I was some kind of servant. "Well? Don't just stand there. Make dinner, I'm starving." The entitlement in her voice made me laugh. "What do you feel like eating?" I asked, my tone calm. Then I added, "Or did your lover not feed you well enough out there?" Her face drained of color. I let out a short laugh, feigning realization. "Oh right, I forgot. The rescue team found you. Sorry, did I interrupt something?" Abigail's entire body tensed. She jumped to her feet, jabbing a finger in my face. "Edward, you're full of it." I raised my hands in mock innocence. No need to pretend anymore. "How was the lingerie? Comfortable?" Her lips twitched, and she went pale. Then, as if something broke inside her, she dropped back onto the couch like all the air had gone out of her. You know." "Yes, I know," I said, my voice hollow now. "And you know what, Abigail? I really didn't think you'd stoop this low. To cheat on me, behind my back." I reached for the folder on the table and set it in front of her. "This is it. We're done. I want a divorce." I handed her the divorce papers. Abigail snatched them from my hand, glanced at the first page, and immediately exploded. "I won't get a penny. Are you kidding me?" I let out a cold laugh and casually held up my phone. "You cheated during the marriage. That's why." Her face turned red with rage. "Edward, there's no way in hell I'm walking away with nothing. We've been married for 2 years. I'm entitled to half the house, the cars, the savings. If you think I'll settle for less, you're dreaming. So what if I cheated? Do you have proof, anything solid?" She leaned in, eyes blazing. "You think people are just gonna take your word for it? Please. If it comes to a court battle, I'll fight it. And I don't think a judge is going to hand you everything based on some dramatic story and a few social media posts. I stared at her, stunned by how shameless she was. I'd gone public with everything, the live stream, the posts, the footage. The entire internet had already made up its mind. But she knew how to play the game. She never brought him home. Never gave me that one undeniable piece of evidence. And she was right. In court, without proof of actual infidelity, it'd be a long and messy fight. The first hearing wouldn't even grant a divorce. They'd probably send us home to reconsider. 6 months later, maybe, we'd get to a second round. Who knew how long this could drag out? I didn't respond. Abigail must have taken my silence as a victory, because she suddenly smirked. You know, Edward, maybe we don't have to throw this whole thing away. We could still work things out. I mean, if you just... Get out, I snapped, pointing to the door. Don't make me sick. She scoffed and stormed off, slamming the bedroom door behind her. Cheating wasn't enough for her, she wanted the money, too. Greedy and heartless. This house was bought with my parents' entire life savings. There's no way I'm letting her get her hands on it. She quit her job, and I supported her without a second thought. For our home, for our future, I ran myself into the ground, working long hours, closing deals, handling clients and late-night calls. Every cent that came into this house came from me. And now she cheats and still thinks she's entitled to half. Over my dead body. I left the house and spent the next 3 days staying with friends, digging into that guy's background. I called up a few lawyers, too, people who specialized in divorce, asset protection, the whole deal. On the 4th day, I went back to grab some clothes. I decided it was best we separate for a while. But when I opened the front door, I was hit with a smell I hadn't encountered in years, real cooking. To my surprise, Abigail walked out of the kitchen carrying a tray of food. She looked up, beaming like nothing had happened. Edward. You're back. Come wash up, dinner's ready. I blinked. Abigail, cooking? I raised an eyebrow. What's this all about? She gave me a sweet smile. What, I can't make a meal once in a while. Sit down, it's getting cold. I didn't trust it for a second. But I sat anyway, curious what game she was playing now. She even poured wine. Once I was at the table, she filled my glass and raised hers with a grin. Edward, I know I messed up. I'm sorry. Let's put it behind us, okay? Let's just move forward. Before I could respond, she downed her glass in one gulp. That alone gave me pause. Abigail was never this agreeable. Something about her smile didn't sit right, it felt too forced, too smooth. She clung to me through dinner, talking, laughing, over the top in her charm. I barely said a word, which only seemed to make her more desperate to win me over. And then, right after I finished eating, I started feeling off. My eyelids felt heavy. My vision blurred. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake it off, but my limbs were sluggish, my head spinning. Abigail leaned in, grinning with sick satisfaction. Surprised, aren't you, Edward? Bet you didn't see this coming. My heart lurched. I watched, helpless, as she reached into my pocket and took my phone. I tried to protest, but my body wouldn't respond. Abigail, you drugged me? She just smiled, cold and triumphant. I must have blacked out. When I came to, it was already the next morning. My phone was lying on the couch. I scrambled to grab it, heart pounding, and opened my banking app. Gone. Every cent, gone. Abigail had drained my accounts and transferred all the money into hers. So that's what this was about. The whole performance, the cooking, the apology, the wine, it was all for the money. Funny enough, I actually felt relieved. At least now, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. I gave a dry laugh, and called the police. Abigail, you never saw it coming, did you? What you didn't know was, I saw everything before I even walked through the door last night. I'd checked the surveillance footage. You and your little boyfriend? I saw the two of you plotting. You were going to make sure I walked away with nothing, even if it meant drugging me. So I played along. What you don't realize is, I just got back from a business trip, and that money? That was $600,000. A significant delivery, that was transferred into my account by our company's finance team. I didn't even expect it to land yesterday. But you were bold, Abigail. Real bold. $600,000. While reporting the theft to the police, I also contacted my company to flag the situation. Then I headed to the hospital to get a full toxicology screen. Abigail had thrown away all the food from last night, but she'd forgotten the trash bag hadn't been taken out yet. I grabbed samples of the leftovers and brought the bottle of wine too. All of it, headed straight for lab testing. After the hospital examination, I called her. She answered on the third ring, smug as ever. Edward, to what do I owe the pleasure? Abigail, bring the money back. Now. Bring it back, she scoffed. That's my money. Weren't you the one who wanted a divorce? Well, here we are. Her voice was full of spite, completely unrepentant. I opened my mouth to reply, but she hung up before I could get a word in. I called back, straight to voicemail. Then the inevitable, she blocked me. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before exhaling slowly. Fine. I had one card left to play. I dialed her mother. The moment my mother-in-law heard my voice, she let out a long sigh. Edward. I can't get involved in whatever's going on between you and Abigail anymore. Fair, I said. But divorce is a serious matter. I get that, she replied, her tone stiffening. But right now, there's something more urgent. You need to tell Abigail to return the $600,000 she took from me. I blinked. Wait, what? $600,000? Her voice dropped. Yes. We never asked for anything from you when you got married. Give that money to Abigail so she can feel secure. I think if she has some savings, maybe she'll finally settle down and take her marriage seriously. I let out a bitter laugh. So you were all in on this, huh? You think I'm an idiot? Then my voice turned cold. Here's the deal, tell Abigail she has 24 hours to return every penny. If she doesn't, I'll make sure she ends up in jail. I hung up. She was probably fuming on the other end of the line, but I didn't care. Not anymore. With the buzz still fresh from last time, I decided to fan the flames a little. I hadn't deleted the old social media posts, they were still racking up comments days later. So I posted a new update. What do you do when someone steals company funds? Asking for a friend. Abigail, this is not marital property. Then another one. Pick up the phone. The police are already involved. So is corporate legal. Just like that, the internet lit up again. The story that had started fading out came roaring back with a vengeance. Oh, he's back. And with a sequel, let's go. Wait, what now? She took company funds? That's a felony. Don't tell me she's off hiking with random dudes again, Edward, how are you staying so calm? Dude, your wife's wild. At this point, why even bother? Even legal professionals jumped in, offering breakdowns of fraud charges, asset recovery, and how to press charges. I didn't need to say much more. The internet was doing half the work for me. This was exactly what I'd been waiting for. There was no way Abigail could ignore the storm brewing online. It was everywhere, posts, comments, even video breakdowns. I knew she'd see it eventually. I waited the entire day. The company had likely contacted her, and I figured the police had too. By nightfall, she finally called me. Edward, she sneered, you really think I'm that stupid? You hire a couple of fake cops and think I'll fall for it? Nice try. That money's mine now. I stared at the phone, stunned. Abigail, do you even hear yourself right now? If I'm lying, may I get hit by a truck this very second? That money was from a client, company funds. I've already reported the theft, and legal is on it. If you don't return it, you're going to prison. She still didn't believe me. Thought I was bluffing. She'd been out of the workforce for over 2 years, she had no idea how much had changed. Fake cops? Seriously? I didn't argue with her. I just followed up with a simple text, laying it out clearly. She didn't reply. Didn't matter. The company's legal team had already filed to freeze her accounts. The process was in motion. And sure enough, just a few hours later, she unblocked me, and started calling like crazy. Ring after ring, she blew up my phone. Edward. What the hell did you do? Why are all my accounts frozen? You bastard. I casually picked up, rubbing my ear. You hit your head or something? That money wasn't yours to touch, I said calmly. So, no, you don't get to spend it. And by the way, an officer will be stopping by soon to escort you to the station. She unleashed a string of curses. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Everything was unfolding exactly as planned. 2 hours later, I arrived at the police station. The moment Abigail saw me, she lunged forward like a wildcat. "Edward, you snake. You set me up." Her long nails came flying at my face. I jumped back, quickly ducking behind one of the officers. "You see this? Officer, look at her." "Ma'am, that's enough." "Calm down," the officer barked. Abigail had no choice but to back off, though she kept pointing at me with trembling hands. "It was him," she shouted. "He transferred the money to me. I'm the victim here." And then, like flipping a switch, she burst into tears. "I'm just a housewife. I haven't worked in years. I have no income, I depend on Edward for everything. I didn't know where the money came from. He's the one who did this." Unbelievable. Her performance could have won her an Oscar. The officer turned to me. "Do you have anything to say?" Without a word, I pulled out 2 folders, one with the lab report, the other with the surveillance footage. She drugged my food. While I was unconscious, she transferred every cent out of my account. As the officer flipped through the documents and scanned the video stills, his expression darkened. Abigail froze. "Wait, what? Surveillance? You installed cameras in the house?" She looked like she'd been slapped across the face. I shrugged. "Yeah. You said you felt unsafe home alone. I wanted to make sure you were okay. Forgot to mention, I had them installed 6 months ago." Her face twisted in fury. "You," she charged at me again, fists clenched, but the officer caught her mid-step and shoved her back. "Ma'am. You need to sit down. Don't make this worse." Abigail had never dealt with anything like this before. The moment reality hit, she cracked. Right there in the interrogation room, she broke down in sobs. Then came the real blow. When the company's legal rep showed up and calmly laid out the potential charges, she panicked, and spilled everything. Naturally, the plan hadn't been hers. She didn't have the brains for it. It was her lover, Evan, who came up with the scheme. Together, they'd plotted to drain my accounts, kick me out of the house, and walk away with everything. Brilliant plan, really. Too bad they underestimated me. It wasn't long before Evan was brought in, too. The moment I saw him, I put on my best performance, wide-eyed and full of feigned shock. Well, look who it is. You're the guy who went hiking with my wife the other day, aren't you?" Even the police paused, taken aback. Something didn't sit right with them. They ran a quick check, and just like that, it all clicked into place. The search and rescue alert. The live stream. The viral posts. They realized that I was the person involved in the missing wife case. Their expressions shifted. There was a flicker of something new in their eyes, sympathy. When they pulled Evan into the holding area, he didn't go quietly. He yelled. He cursed. Tried to throw Abigail under the bus. That was all it took. Abigail, already shaking, broke down again. Between sobs, she confessed to everything. With lawyers present and the company's legal counsel weighing in, the truth unraveled fast. Abigail had no choice but to return every cent. Then Evan, desperate to dodge accountability, turned on her completely, claimed Abigail seduced him, that it was all her idea. Unexpected? Definitely. But also incredibly useful. That little outburst gave me exactly what I needed, undeniable proof of the affair. Right then and there, I instructed my attorney to file a lawsuit. Fraud. Theft. Adultery. The works. Only then did it finally hit Abigail that I wasn't bluffing. She ran to me in tears, grabbing my sleeve, pleading through hiccuped sobs. "Edward, please. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I'm sorry. I'll do anything, just don't ruin me." I scoffed, pulling my arm free. "Abigail," I said, my voice flat, "pack your things and get out of my house. I'm still calm enough to say that nicely, consider it a mercy. Let's not make this uglier than it already is." With that, I walked out, my lawyer right behind me. That night, Abigail came back. And this time, she brought her mother with her. The moment they stepped into the house, my mother-in-law stormed toward me. "Edward, you're unbelievable. You set a trap just to make sure my daughter walked away with nothing. Are you proud of yourself?" I gave a small nod. "Actually, yeah. Pretty proud. But I'd be even prouder if she had to face real consequences for what she did. Abigail's face twisted in anger. How can you be so heartless? We were married. Married? I scoffed, like she'd just told the biggest joke I'd ever heard. You didn't seem to remember that when you were sneaking off with Evan. But now, suddenly, I'm your husband again? Save it. Just get out. Abigail opened her mouth to argue but couldn't find the words. Her mother looked like she wanted to jump in again, but Abigail held up a hand, stopping her. I leaned back against the doorframe, arms crossed, and watched as they packed up. I even pulled up the security feed to keep an eye on them, just in case. To their credit, they behaved. No snooping, no drama. Just 4 suitcases and a lot of silence. As they stepped out the door, Abigail glanced back, eyes lingering like she might say something. Don't forget, I said coldly. You've got court tomorrow morning. She froze for half a second, then turned and walked away, trailing behind her mother. I let the door close and finally exhaled. Finally. Free. Whatever came next, it was bound to be better than this. The next morning, I showed up at the courthouse right on time. I waited. And waited. 2 hours went by, and Abigail never showed. My patience snapped. I called her. Abigail, did you forget today was our court hearing? On the other end, her voice was calm, too calm. Edward. I'm not ready to get divorced. You cheated. We're getting divorced. End of story. I hung up, opened my photo gallery, and selected the perfect set of images, her and Evan hiking together, her sneaking out, the live stream headlines, the viral post about the missing wife. I typed up a caption and sent it all to her. What do you think? If I post this with a little push and the right hashtag, you'll go viral in no time. America's favorite cheating housewife. Might even land you a podcast deal. It only took her a minute to reply. She caved. Completely. Edward, are you really going to push me this far? Abigail asked, her voice shaking slightly. I gave her a cool look. That depends on you. Sign the papers and we walk away clean. Otherwise, if this goes public again, you're the one who's going to lose more. That did it. Fear finally overtook her pride. She came with me to the courthouse and completed the filing. There was still a mandatory 30-day cooling-off period before the divorce would be finalized. 30 days where anything could happen, but I hoped it wouldn't. As we walked out of the building, Abigail turned to me with a soft, almost wistful smile. Edward, she said, I know I messed up. We were married, we shared a life. Can I at least have one last hug? I raised an eyebrow, hesitated for a second, then gave her a brief, distant embrace. She betrayed me, yes. But in a strange way, she also taught me something I never really understood before. Marriage only works when 2 people share values, when they want the same life, not just the same roof. Abigail and I got married because of the pregnancy. There was never a real foundation. After we lost the baby, our relationship fell apart. And now, looking back, I realized this breakdown didn't happen overnight. It had been coming for a long time. For a while, Abigail stayed quiet. Surprisingly so. She rented a small place directly across the street from mine. Her explanation? I want to win you back. It would have been funny, if it weren't so sad. Who'd want a woman like that again? But she kept pushing. One day she came knocking because she'd forgotten to buy oil. Another day it was soy sauce. Then it was a broken light fixture she needed a strong man to fix. And then, there she was again. Wearing a paper-thin silk nightgown, standing in my doorway. I let out a long sigh. Abigail, stop trying. I'm not falling for it again. She froze, lips parting slightly. Her eyes went red. We were in love once, Edward, she whispered. You were willing to accept me before. Why not now? I shook my head, gently but firmly pushing her back outside. Then I handed her a business card. If something breaks, call the landlord. Or the property manager. But don't call me. We're done, Abigail. Please, stop showing up like this. Let's end this with dignity. I don't even want to say the ugliest parts out loud. The first time Abigail went on a date with Evan, I was there, sitting outside the hotel, alone on a bench all night long. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I just sat there, trying to make sense of it all. Was she with someone else because I wasn't enough? That thought tore me apart. I spiraled, second-guessing everything. Blaming myself. Trying to figure out where I went wrong. During the day, I buried myself in work, it was the only thing that kept me from losing it. But at night, when I came home and saw her in front of the mirror, curling her hair, trying on lipstick, posing with that smug little smirk, it hit me all over again. She didn't look like someone living in guilt. She looked radiant. Carefree. Like I never existed. And still, I told her we could try. I told her we could rebuild. But she brushed me off with hollow words and a painted smile, all while using my money to live it up, and sneaking around behind my back with another man. Not this time. I wasn't going to play the fool again. 2 weeks later, Evan was released. The fallout from his little scheme had been serious, but not permanent. The plan he cooked up got Abigail arrested, and my mother-in-law came crawling to me, begging for forgiveness. My parents called too, urging me to let it go. Don't make it ugly, they said. Corner a rabbit, even it'll bite. I thought about my job, my reputation. I had to be smart. So, I signed the settlement. The company's legal team backed off, agreed not to pursue charges. But mercy doesn't always teach lessons. The moment Evan walked free, he went straight to Abigail. And to no one's surprise, she didn't hesitate for a second. Ran right into his arms. They didn't bother hiding it either. Moved in together like they were proud of it. I watched Abigail strut past my front window every morning in her tight little dresses, heels clicking, sunglasses on like she was headed to some fashion shoot. Like none of this had ever happened. Like she hadn't begged me just days ago to take her back. All I saw now was a woman who didn't know what love meant, and a man who didn't care who he destroyed, as long as he got what he wanted. I wasn't heartbroken, far from it. Honestly, I was just relieved. Relieved that I didn't fall for her lies a second time. That alone was worth celebrating. But then, Abigail showed up again. She was hanging on Evan's arm like he was a trophy, chin lifted in smug defiance as she looked me dead in the eyes. "Edward," she said with venom-coated confidence, "you'll regret this. Without us to draw attention to you, you'll fade into nothing. Let's see how long you survive once the spotlight moves on." I blinked, stunned for a second. She actually believed I'd posted everything online, for attention? She thought I exposed my own humiliation, my wife's affair, my entire marriage falling apart, just to gain followers? God. She was more delusional than I thought. I took a slow breath, stared at her for a moment, then said evenly, "Whatever makes you happy." And I closed the door. From outside, I could still hear the two of them laughing, Abigail and Evan, loud and obnoxious like they were starring in some twisted rom-com. I didn't say a word. Just let out a long, tired sigh. Later that night, my buddy Liam called. Asked if I had time to grab dinner. We'd spoken before, he'd warned me about Evan. Said he had a bad feeling. Said he wasn't new to this kind of game. Turns out, Liam was right. He'd done some digging. Turns out Evan had a long track record of scamming women in other cities, different names, different jobs, same routine. Over dinner, we talked. We laughed a little, but the weight of it all still lingered. When I told him Abigail had gone back to Evan, he nearly dropped his fork. "You bent over backward for that woman," he said, shaking his head. "And now she's with a professional con artist. What the hell is she thinking?" Then he looked me dead in the eye. "Promise me something, Edward. No matter what happens, don't go back. I swear, if you do, I'll never let you live it down." I chuckled. "Don't worry. I've learned my lesson. Some bridges are meant to burn. But I need your help," I added, leaning in. "I want to track down every woman Evan ever scammed. I'll cover the costs, whatever it takes. He doesn't deserve another shot at ruining someone else's life. I want him behind bars, for good." Liam narrowed his eyes. "This about Abigail?" "No," I said firmly. "This is for me." Then I told him something I hadn't said out loud before. A suspicion that had haunted me for years. "I think, that baby we lost. It might not have been mine." Liam froze. "You serious?" I nodded slowly. "You know me. I hold my liquor like a rock. But the night Abigail and I first got together, I was drunk off one glass of whiskey. Completely blacked out. That's never happened before or since. When I woke up that morning, Abigail was crying uncontrollably. At the time, I felt like I had no choice. She said she didn't remember much either, and that it was all a blur. So I took responsibility. But what really scared me was what came next. One time, and she was pregnant. We got married. Just 2 weeks in, she had a fall. Said she slipped. My mom had been taking care of her like she was made of glass, careful, attentive, practically tiptoeing around her. And still, somehow, she fell. Abigail cried so hard that day, it looked real. But afterward, she bounced back fast. Too fast. It took me much longer to recover. The more I thought about it, the more something didn't sit right. Abigail wasn't the kind of person to break down that easily, or bounce back that quickly. It all felt off. When I told Liam what I was starting to suspect, he didn't hesitate. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. I got you, man. Leave it to me. Liam had connections, more than most. Normally, I wouldn't air my dirty laundry like this, but I didn't have anyone else I trusted. No one but him. I handed him $100,000, no questions asked. 3 days later, he returned with his harvest. Real. 3 social media accounts. 3 different women. Each one added me and shared their stories, how they'd met Evan, how he manipulated them, drained them, and disappeared. Different names, same game. I was done playing nice. That evening, I knocked on the door across the hall. I knew Evan had just stepped out for groceries, timing was perfect. Abigail answered. She tilted her chin up the moment she saw me, smug as ever. What, can't stay away? Don't tell me you're regretting it now. Too late, Edward. I gave her a look. Calm. Measured. Abigail, I said, I'm only here out of courtesy. We were married once, so I'll say this once and walk away. Evan is a scam artist. You need to be careful. She rolled her eyes so hard it looked painful. Don't bother trying to poison me against him. We're fine. We're happy. And once that divorce decree comes in, I won't have to deal with you ever again. She shoved the door shut, right in my face. I stood there for a second, then shrugged. You can't save someone who's hellbent on self-destruction. I'd said my piece. I wouldn't waste another breath. Not long after, Evan came back and heard I'd stopped by. A shouting match erupted between him and Abigail, so loud it shook the walls. I wasn't even trying to eavesdrop, but it was impossible to ignore. Eventually, the commotion got so bad, neighbors from downstairs came up to complain. I opened my door and leaned against the frame, watching like it was free entertainment. A middle-aged couple knocked on their door and let them have it, called them out for disturbing the peace, warned them they'd call the police if it kept up. And just like that, Abigail and Evan both fell silent. I nearly doubled over laughing. Without me there to baby her, no one gave a damn about her feelings anymore. Satisfied, I closed my door and went back inside, feeling better than I had in weeks. A few days later, I met with the 3 women Evan had conned. We chose a quiet cafe downtown. All 3 of them were around the same age. Same type, too, similar to Abigail, actually. Evan clearly had a type, beautiful, a bit naive, and emotionally dependent. One of the women leaned forward and said, Evan told me he wanted to get married, buy a house. He took $300,000 from me. Another scoffed. That's nothing. He got $600,000 out of me. Then a third woman, a woman with curly hair and crimson lipstick, said calmly but firmly, I took out $2 million. I gave him everything for our future. And the next thing I know, he's hiking with your wife. I sat back, took a breath, then said what I'd been holding in for a while. Look, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. My wife? She's just another manipulator. She thought I'd be her fallback guy. Now I want both of them in jail where they belong. They nodded slowly. Once I had all the chat logs, transaction records, and proof in hand, I moved forward. It still baffled me that none of them had reported him. Out of shame, maybe. That's why Evan had slipped through the system so easily, no one ever pressed charges. 2 weeks later, Abigail and I showed up at the courthouse for the final step, signing the divorce papers. Evan was there, of course. Holding her like a prize. As soon as the documents were stamped and handed over, they couldn't even wait to leave. They kissed right there in the hallway like they were starring in some trashy soap opera. Even the clerk at the front desk looked stunned. I couldn't help it, I let out a dry laugh. Big day, huh? I said loud enough for them to hear. You 2 planning to register for marriage while you're at it? That stopped them cold. Abigail turned to Evan, her smile faltering. Evan looked away, eyes darting. I smirked. What's wrong? He didn't tell you. Maybe he's not exactly the commitment type. I turned to walk away, tossing one last line over my shoulder. Careful, Abigail. You're not great at spotting lies, and your brain's not exactly built for long games. I didn't need to look back. Abigail's face flushed with anger, clearly ready to fire back, but Evan stepped in, all smiles. Don't you understand romance, he said, playing it cool. You don't just get married. First, you propose. I haven't even proposed to Abigail yet, marriage comes later. I shrugged. Then buy her a ring. Proposals can happen anytime. Unless you're too cheap for that. His smile tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. Evan grabbed Abigail's hand and stormed off, dragging her with him. I watched them go, lips curled in amusement. Abigail, if you let this slide without making a scene, I might actually lose respect for you. She had no sense of financial boundaries before, and she certainly wasn't going to develop any now. Divorced or not, Evan wasn't about to let her go without squeezing every last dollar out of her. Legally, even though Abigail was the one at fault, that didn't mean she walked away with nothing. I ended up giving her a $100,000 settlement. Apparently, even that was too tempting for Evan to pass up. Guy was starving, for money, not love. Edith, the red-lipped, sharp-tongued woman who'd been scammed for $2 million, reached out after hearing my plan. She was eager to help. I'll pose as your girlfriend, she said. I dated him for 6 months. I know him inside out. I couldn't help chuckling. You know him inside out? He conned you out of $2 million. That hit her like a slap. She stiffened immediately. Just say yes or no, she snapped. I held up a hand. I'm not saying no. But if he sees you with me, don't you think he'll get suspicious? She gave a low, cynical laugh. You don't get it. Evan's a snake, sure, but he's also got an ego the size of Texas. When we were together, I once opened a folder on his laptop by accident. It was full of profiles of every woman he's ever dated. Even the ones they moved on with. He kept tabs on all of them. He compares himself to their new partners. Constantly. If he sees me with you, it'll eat him alive. And that's when he'll rush to lock things down with Abigail. He'll go straight to the courthouse, just to prove something. Because Abigail? She's just his pawn now. They're in this mess together, and he'll want to keep her under control. I considered that. Twisted, but effective. All right, I said finally. Let's do it. We took a photo together, sitting side by side in the cafe, her hand resting on mine, fingers intertwined. I posted it to my social media with no caption. Just as expected, Abigail blew up the moment she saw the photo. My phone rang instantly. Edward. You lied to me. You've got a girlfriend now, you're the one who cheated, aren't you? And you only gave me a $100,000? I'm suing you. I rolled my eyes and replied calmly, go ahead and sue me. Is there a law against dating after divorce proceedings start? Look at me, I've got a decent job, I clean up well, I've got savings, a car, a house. Why wouldn't someone want to be with me? But you? You're clinging to Evan. And what's he given you, exactly? Face it, Abigail, you've got no ring, no title, not even a piece of paper. After everything, you're still not sure if you're his girlfriend or just the side chick. I don't respect you. At all. And with that, I hung up. She started flooding my phone with angry texts, but I didn't bother reading them, I just blocked her. Let's see how she handles being ignored for once. Over the next few days, I made sure to keep up the act. Edith and I were all over town, strolling through parks, sharing coffee, holding hands. Public enough for anyone watching to notice. Especially Abigail. Word got around fast. Turns out, she couldn't take it. Neighbors said she was constantly fighting with Evan, screaming matches nearly every night. Edith, playing her part perfectly, began posting photos online too, matching outfits, brunch dates, late-night walks. Evan snapped. A few fights later, he decided to just get it over with and dragged Abigail to the courthouse to register their marriage. Abigail, of course, was ecstatic. She took a photo of their marriage certificate and blasted it all over social media, captioned with hearts and promises of forever. I raised an eyebrow as I scrolled past it. Well, they'd made it official now. And since they wanted to play house so badly, fine. But they'd better be ready. Because from this point on, I wasn't holding back. On the day Abigail and Evan were supposed to get married, I showed up, uninvited. And I wasn't alone. Right behind me were the 3 women Evan had conned, and a pair of uniformed police officers. The moment I stepped into the venue, dressed sharp and calm, Abigail's relatives started whispering. "Edward, today's Abigail's wedding day," one aunt murmured, trying to smooth things over. "I know you two had a past, but it's time to let that go." I chuckled, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "You think I'm here to stop the wedding? Please. She's all yours, I wouldn't take her back if you paid me." Abigail's face twisted in rage beneath her white veil. "Edward, what did you just say?" I shrugged. "Just here to drop off a little truth bomb. That guy you're about to marry? He's a serial scammer. A professional con artist." I turned and pointed at Evan, and the 3 women standing beside me. The moment Evan saw them, all color drained from his face. He froze, as if he'd just seen ghosts. Then the cops stepped forward. "Evan Collins," one officer said, "you're under arrest for multiple counts of fraud and theft." Abigail screamed. In full wedding dress, she clutched her veil and stumbled forward. "Edward, what the hell is going on?" I pulled my arm away. "You really want to know? He's been scamming women for years. Millions of dollars. You were just the next in line. That $100,000 settlement I gave you? You spent it fast, didn't you? Guess who it really went to?" Abigail swayed, speechless. "And then?" "What?" her mother shrieked, bursting into the chaos. "That man said he needed $300,000 to put down on a house. He told us he had money tied up in a savings account. He borrowed money from me too. Said he invested it in a bond. He told me he just needed help with a deposit." Voices erupted from all over the guest list. I stood back, stunned at how fast Evan had moved. He'd conned half the room. One by one, the guests followed the police out, statements to give, paperwork to file. Abigail tried to go with them, but the hotel manager stopped her cold at the door. "Ma'am, the wedding bill needs to be settled before you leave." She turned back to me, eyes wide with tears, lips trembling. I offered a polite shrug. "Sorry, Abigail. Not my problem anymore." I turned to Edith and the other 2 women, nodded, and together we walked out, leaving behind the chaos and the sobbing bride-to-be. What Abigail did after that, I'll never know. When she found out Evan was a con artist, she collapsed to the floor like her world had shattered. And me? I walked out into the sunlight, gave the ladies a warm goodbye, and climbed into my car. The whole thing made the local news by nightfall. A few bloggers dug up old photos. Abigail's face was all over social media. "Wait a minute, isn't this the woman who went missing on that hiking trip? Oh my god, she's the wife from the viral missing wife post." I knew that story had layers. This is the plot twist we were waiting for. Masterclass. He used himself as bait to take down a scammer. Absolute legend. I smiled as I scrolled past the comments. As far as I was concerned, this chapter was closed. And the rest of my life? Fortunately, I will live a happy life in the future.